Your Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez, and I have been covering hockey for a dozen years now. Maybe you can call me semi-credentialed, but I've been covering hockey for a while across several levels. And yeah, that's who I am. I have written on some previous, publications, but I've been around. I've been around for a long time. That is to say that I've covered it here on Locked On for 4 seasons. I've also done some previous freelance work in the past, but I've been credentialed and I've been around. Why am I bringing this up right now? Why am I talking about myself and my past? You may have noticed already this is a cold open, or this is not a cold open rather, and we're just going straight into it. There's a big reason for that. Some of you may have seen on the Locked On Network over the past weekend that there was a video that went out that went viral for the wrong reasons. And this is someone that's unfortunately part of the Locked On Podcast Network. So first, let me get into why I'm mentioning this right now. There was a gentleman by the name of Cyrus, who is the current, as of now, host of Locked On Warriors, as in the Golden State Warriors, just up the 5 freeway. He had some rather disturbing words to say, where he pretty much said that fans should not be listening to shows that are run by other fans, and that only those that are credentialed are pretty much worth listening. I happened to hear this while I was off on a secret project. I can't say what it is, but I was off on a secret project on Friday, and that was kind of a weird time for me to get that, and I had to hold my tongue because of where I was at. Fast forward to when I eventually get home Friday night and really just kind of take everything in, and I'll admit I was pissed off. I was really upset and disappointed that Cyrus said these words under the umbrella of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's disgusting, really. I've been a part of this network for over 3 years, for a long time. I'm proud to be part of this network for the past 3 years, and I've met some fantastic people on this podcast, and I've met some fantastic friends, a lot of whom I talk to. And without going into much detail, someone that I love and care about, I met through this. Well, I mean, her and I had known each other tangentially even before this podcast, but we really, sort of got to know each other more because of this podcast. And if you've been listening or watching for a while, you know who I'm talking about. So you can put 2 and 2 together on that case. But I've met some of the best people in the world because of my time on Locked On. And there's some fantastic colleagues across the NHL network. I mean, I could list them all, but that would take up the rest of the entire podcast, and we have more to get to. For me to be part of this, it's a blessing, and I'll admit that I feel like kind of an outsider because there are NHL hosts that are credentialed right now, and I don't consider myself above anybody. In fact, I'm a fan just like a lot of you watching. I mean, I'm a fan of good hockey. I'm a fan of good sports. I always have been. And I do not share Cyrus's opinion at all. I mean, the fact that he even uttered the words, why would fans listen to shows that they like? Fans listen to the shows that they like because there's a certain sense of entertainment, because there's a certain sense of community and belonging. You know, I host this because I am passionate about hockey. I have been for a very, very long time. Even before the Ducks were a team, I was passionate about, like, I loved hockey back when the Mighty Ducks movie came out back in 1992. And there was only one hockey team, and that one hockey team is the crosstown rival, the Los Angeles Kings. And I'll admit, I liked watching Kings hockey because, I'm a kid. I loved Wayne Gretzky. And then the Ducks came to town, and one of my favorite players of all time became a Duck, Teemu Selanne. And they had Paul Kariya, who for me is like GOAT status player. Love Paul Kariya. I don't share Cyrus's opinion. I really don't. And at one point, pretty much, and I'm going to repeat what I said, pretty much every credentialed person that I know, whether in the minor leagues or the majors, started off as a fan. Anyone that has even a minor league credential started off as a fan. Every one of my colleagues, like everyone that I know that covers the San Diego Gulls or the Ontario Reign or the Bakersfield Condors or any of these other AHL teams, they started off as fans, folks. I even think about, some of the guys down in San Diego, like Andy Zilch, the once in a while that I've talked to him. He's a fan too. Dan Wood, he's a fan. Someone that I truly respect, Steve Carroll, who is the Ducks radio announcer. He's a fan of hockey. He has loved hockey since he was a kid. Every person started off as a fan. If you're passionate about a sport or a team, keep going. If you're someone that has a podcast and you're passionate about the Ducks, keep going. And this is where I just want to give shout outs here. There are several other fantastic podcasts that are Ducks podcasts. I could list all of them. Ducks and Pucks, they're a fan podcast. Forever Mighty, I will always give a big, big shout out to. Forever Mighty guys are really cool. Crash the Pond, run by some awesome people. Like listening to Crash the Pond once in a while. Back in the day, Anaheim Calling, the SB Nation, the old school SB Nation page. They're really cool. And, Duck Talk is cool. The Quack Report, get to converse with them on the Locked On Ducks Twitter once in a while. Pucks of a Feather. And even the newcomer, Late Arrivals. Late Arrivals has come in with a bang recently, and it's entertaining. It is very entertaining. And I even know one of the guys that's on Late Arrivals. Really cool guy. They are all fans of the Ducks. Some of them have been credentialed before. But they're all fans. And that's what the majority of these podcasts are. And they all have a following. For me to even be part of the network is a blessing. But I'm actually a little bit ashamed and embarrassed that someone on the network actually said that fan podcasts are not worth listening to. And anybody that does not have a credential should not be taken seriously. Look, there are some fantastic podcasts out there, like hockey podcasts, where the people hosting are not credentialed. I'll throw out another one. The Hockey Guy. Yeah. The big time jersey collector. Me being a jersey guy, I love watching him on YouTube. He gives a tremendous amount of entertainment on his podcast, and I love listening to him because I kind of relate to him in a way. Like, I loved his jersey breakdown on Reverse Retros. Like, that was really well done. I tried to kind of do the same thing on my Reverse Retro by actually showing part of my collection as well. He does a fantastic job. And I'll even show off another, like, this is how much of a jersey head I am. Like, one of my latest ones that I got, Quebec Nordiques. This is a GOAT jersey. Love the old school Nordiques with the fleur-de-lis. I can relate to that because, I'm a hockey person myself. I always have been. I've been collecting jerseys for a while. I've been watching hockey for God knows how long. Like I've said on the outset, I've been covering hockey for a long, long time. A lot of that in the minors. Just because we're not credentialed by the NHL yet, that doesn't mean that our opinions or what we say is completely meaningless. So I just want to say, and I'm going to say this on the record, I hope Cyrus gets deeply punished, and I'll even go so far as to say on the record, I hope he's gone, because what he said is damning and embarrassing, and it invalidates me. Like, it does invalidate me. I mean, I know it's strong words to say I want him gone. I mean, to be realistic, I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope there is some major, major repercussions. Maybe a suspension. But I will say that the views and opinions expressed by Cyrus from the Locked On Warriors podcast do not reflect the opinions of the majority of hosts on the Locked On podcast network. I do not share those opinions. In fact, I am welcoming to anybody and everybody. That's why I shout out everybody. Like, I'll shout out fans from several different teams. You know, like, they're all great fans. And this is partially why I do Goals Thursday, to give the Goals a shout out. I mean, I'll even shout out the Goals fans. And I'll go a little personal here. Saturday night at Toyota Arena, the Goals fans came out in droves. And even though I had my headset on, I could hear the Goals fans screaming, "Let's go Goals." Even in the midst of thousands of Reign fans, I could hear the about 100 Goals fans chanting, and the Reign fans just coming back and forth with them. I love that. That's partially what being a fan is all about, is coming together as a community. And I love talking to those fans, and I will always shout them out, and I will always support them. You know, getting to see them after the game, like having them go down on the ice level, that was cool. And I made it a point to stick around, and there were even some of the Reign folks that went up to the Goals fans and said hi, because there's a respect there. And I loved seeing the Goals fans standing outside in the rain. By the way, it was raining Saturday night. Ontario rain, haha, yeah. It was raining outside. And there were Goals fans just waiting for the team bus to come by. And you could see the team bus honking their horn. I thought that was really cool that they all stuck around to support their team. And what was also really cool, by the way, was seeing the Goals fans just kind of converse and stick around for a while. And maybe 10 minutes later, the Ontario Reign bus comes around. And the Goals fans are like, you know what? We'll cheer for them too. We will cheer for the opponent. And they did that. And you know what happened? The Reign bus also honked their horn. And you could see some of the Ontario Reign players kind of waving along too. Like, they respect the enemy. Or sorry, they respect the enemy. Look, there's no enemy here. We're all a hockey family. So I say this, you know, as my own opinion. I respect each and every Ducks podcast that's out there, because they each have something to bring to the table. So for someone on the network that I'm a part of, like I'm a part of the Locked On Network, I still wear the shirt proudly, but what Cyrus said is a black eye for the Locked On Podcast Network. I don't share his opinion at all. Not even one bit. There's a lot of from other sports. There's great fan podcasts that I will listen to once in a while because they're entertaining. There are other hosts on the Locked On Podcast Network that started off doing their own things because they are fans. And I respect them 100%. So for the final time, I will say, if you're thinking about starting a podcast and you're passionate about it, keep that passion going. Let me know. Let me know how passionate you are. So that's really what I wanted to say about that. And I realize that I have gone way over. So you know what? I might just make this a standalone podcast. And, you know, if it's its own podcast, so be it. And I'm not going to muddy this podcast with ad reads. I'm not. So what I'm going to do is take the brunt of that. It is what it is. But we're going to take a short intermission. I'm going to collect my thoughts, and I'll be back on the other side. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez, and I've been covering hockey for a long time. And that's fine. But, there's other hosts out there that have also been covering hockey for a long time. And I validate everyone's opinions. So this is where I'm just going to talk to you, the listener or the watcher. I'm going to talk directly to you. It's been a tough year for me. Like, as you may have heard, more than likely, it has been a difficult year dealing with deaths, plural. And I was so overcome by the amount of support that I got from hosts from different podcasts, by the way. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to get well wishes from other Ducks podcasts, all saying like, you know what, like, we're with you. And even when I was gone for a few days, I was overcome with emotion when I eventually like came back and saw all the messages. I was a little bit overcome. I mean, I was still in a little bit of grief, but the fact that I got all these messages from different people across Ducks line and Ducks Twitter, it really did mean the world to me. Especially going through some difficult times this year. And I will admit that it has affected this podcast a little bit. I mean, I really wanted to come out with a bang to start off the season, but, real life happens. Real life happens, unfortunately. And, disasters happen. Really tragic that one of those big disasters on in Mexico indirectly, started something else. Family member, grandma dying. I mean, that was tough. That was very, very tough. And I'll admit that it did get to me a little bit. And I'm still so hopeful that I can try to provide for you, the listener or the watcher, a quality podcast. So I'm going to make it my pledge to make as good a quality podcast as possible and try to bring in as many guests as possible and try to include you. So, if you a fan, if you ever want to come on the show, if you want to talk Ducks, if you want to talk shop for a few minutes, if you want to grieve this Ducks start, let me know. I will be glad to have you on. We could make it like a monthly thing, like once a month, have fans come on. I would love to have each and every one of you come on. Guests, I would love to continue to try to bring along guests. I want to try to do something that I started last season on the audio side, but make it more video this season, is try to have some guests on for Goals Thursday. Someone that I love and respect so much, John Broadbent. I've had John on the podcast on the audio side several times, and we always have a fun time talking Goals hockey. I mean, I definitely have my opinions on the Goals over this past weekend. Some of it seeing up close. But I would love to try to really bring you guys the high quality content that you frankly deserve. So that's going to be my pledge for the rest of the time that I am hosting this very podcast, because I think you deserve it. Even if I am not like a professional like Cyrus is for Locked On Warriors, so what? So what? I'm doing this because I care. I'm doing this because I'm passionate. And I know all of you watching are passionate about the Ducks as well. And I bet each and every one of you are pissed. I bet you're all just super pissed, ticked off, whatever adjective you could think of on the start of this Ducks season. And you know what? Like, I'll share it. I'll share it I mean, a little bit of behind the curtains, behind the scenes, but I'm just going to come out and say it. Back in the Wild West days of the Locked On Podcast Network, I was able to have free reins to pretty much do whatever I wanted. And that was some of my best creative stuff. I mean, I'm honestly, in a weird way, most proud of the content that I put out that first season. You know, I had on some great guests. I mean, I somehow had the balls to get the color commentator for that very first Dia de los Muertos game. The first one. My favorite one. The one where Ryan Getzlaf became El Capitan. I was passionate about that game because I'm a Latino. Because I was proud that the Ducks finally got a Spanish language broadcast. And to me, at least for me personally, that was one of the best broadcasts of all time in Ducks history. Nothing to me beats Ryan Getzlaf beating the Vancouver Canucks in overtime and getting that game-winning goal and hearing the crowd roaring and hearing the call, Ryan Getzlaf, El Capitan! That is, to me, is still one of the best calls I've ever heard, and even like way long ago, 3 years ago. That is still one of my favorite podcasts that I've ever done, and one of those that I'm the most proud of because of who I am as a person. And, you know, those of you watching, like, that's the kind of stuff that makes me proud. And that made me feel legit, even back when I had maybe a few hundred listeners. And, you know, yeah, it was only a few hundred listeners at the time, but I was still super proud of that. I mean, I have considerably more listens now, but back then, I mean, this podcast was a baby back then. It wasn't even a year old. It wasn't even a season old. And I landed those kind of guests. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of getting to do Hockey Jeopardy because that was the Wild West days back then. And I was proud of being unapologetic and super silly and cracking jokes all the time because, well, first off, I knew the Ducks were lousy back then, so I could joke around however I wanted because I knew they were terrible. There's a video that I put out a couple years ago just about my feelings about the Ducks, and it was just me drinking. Or sorry, yeah, I was drinking and let out a giant F-bomb, but I cut it off right before I said the F-bomb. That was the kind of creative stuff that I could put out there back then. And now it's kind of, you know, I can't really do that anymore. Like, I'll admit, I can't really do that kind of stuff anymore. I mean, some of the stuff that I really love doing is kind of being a little bit sardonic, but also at the same time being honest. Because I know how Duck fans felt back then. It was maddening. It pissed a lot of fans off when Trevor Zegras got benched. Ticked me off. I love watching Trevor Zegras play. He's amazing. He deserves top line minutes. So, yeah, I feel your pain. And it's a shame that I can't really go, like, balls out. But, like I just said, I'm still going to try to give you the best content possible. And if this doesn't light a flame under my ass, then I don't know what will. So get ready, because I'm going to try to give you the best content possible. And once again, my opinion is my own. Despite what some idiot said, I'm still proud. Despite all of that, despite all the haters saying, oh, Locked On sucks. Like, we shouldn't expect anything less from a Locked On. Look, I'm still proud to be part of this network. And I've met some great people. And I even saw some comments, some from Ducks fans, saying, no, you know what? Like, Locked On has some really cool people. And I've seen the comments. I've read the comments from some of you saying, like, you know, Locked On has some cool people, not just from this team, but from other teams. And even from rival podcasts. They've all, like, I've seen a couple of people that are on Rival Ducks podcasts say, now hold on, like there's some cool Locked On people, and they're awesome. So the level of respect I have for all of them, I love it. I really love it. So still proud to be part of this network, despite what he said. So yeah, that's my final thoughts on that. All right, that's going to do it for this podcast. I will put out another one later today because I still have a lot of thoughts about this road trip. I mean, I have thoughts on this road trip that could last an hour. Lots of thoughts. I also have lots of thoughts on the goals. That can last an hour too. Lucky the goals at least have another game before goals Thursday. So I'll save my thoughts on the entirety of the goals on Thursday. Whew. But yeah, I will just say, Braden Tracy, please come to the Ducks, save this team. Because he's looked really good overall. And Ducks, please do something about your PK. That's just a small snippet of some of the thoughts that I have on this past road trip. And I hear you. I hear you, Ducks fans. I see the tweets. You're all angry. All of you. Well, maybe not all of you, but 99% of you are angry. So it may take on this same angry tone next podcast. Because going over on a road trip, it would piss anybody off. Anybody. So that's what's coming up. And again, hoping to have some guests next week and the following week. And I'll be transparent. I'll be flying out day after Halloween for New York Marathon. And here's what I'm going to do for the marathon. I'm going to have my iPod with me. I'm going to listen to all the other Ducks podcasts. I'm going to download one episode from each of the other Ducks podcasts and listen to them while I'm running. Because I think they're all cool. All right. That's it. That's my final thought. Some of it's rambling, but, you know, that's how I feel. And I don't care if it's rambling. It's how I feel. Love all of you guys. You guys are all awesome. Those of you that have said hi to me at the arenas, like, and there's been a couple of you that have tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you're JD Hernandez," or one person, you know, Jose, who I've mentioned, introduced himself by saying "Locked On Ducks." That felt validating towards me. It made me feel really good. So, you know, I'm doing this for you guys. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms. Make Locked On Ducks your first listen. Make Locked On NHL your second listen. Listen to all the other Locked On podcasts because there's some great people on the network. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter is at LO_Ducks. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. If you want to drop me a line, you could do so at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. Once again, thank you all so much for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. And I hope to hear from all of you. I really do. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. I'll be back later to talk about that road trip. Please, please be safe out there. Please be kind to one another, Cyrus. And Ducks, fly together.